Okay. So we all have superpowers. We have disabilities. We're contemplative. We're rebellious. Sometimes we have to find ourselves. We have wisdom. We have religion. We have undying faith. We're global minds. Most of the times we face violence. We're misunderstood. We have scars. But still, we're still starved for love. Somehow, we still manage to pick ourselves up. We hope to dream bigger. We hope to laugh harder, to overcome, to love longer, to give back, and hopefully bring back the humanity. So we're all human. That's basically what makes us human. So a while ago, I met this gentleman. He spoke to me about a book called The Front Porch. I was very interested in the idea, so I got to talking with him. And he told me that around 2 or 3 decades ago, the United States of America was very different. In terms of we were more open. We would speak to our neighbors. We knew what they were talking about. We knew their children. We had barbecues together. But over time, it's declined. We get from our houses, we move from our houses to our garage, to a car, and then eventually we run our errands, we go to work. We come back, and there's no form of interaction with anybody around us. We're just cordoned off into our own little bubble. He made an interesting comparison with Indians. So he spoke to me about his own grandmother and told me that his grandmother would sit all day long on this front porch, essentially a balcony that they had in their house, and talk to their neighbors across balconies. They would be having tea together, they would be chatting together about their grandchildren, about their children, about their lives, and basically having an environment of a society, within a society. He also spoke to me about how when he was growing up, all the doors in his entire building would be left completely open. So children would essentially be running from one house to another house, from one play area to another play area, interacting, growing up together. What he then said was that we've closed our doors. Today, we're sitting at home, very comfortable with our entire circles that we've been kind of conditioned into. You go to school, you make your friends, you play with those friends, you go for tuitions with these friends. You have no interaction with people who are not in your immediate circle. He said to me, when he saw my page, that to me, Humans of Bombay is bringing that front porch back. That got me thinking. And as I was thinking about it and going through the page, going through the insights, I realized that it's in some way true. If you think about the root of it, we've been told as children, sometimes even as adults, that keep away from strangers. We've been conditioned with the mindset that a person who you don't know potentially holds danger towards you, is somebody who's going to kidnap you, is somebody who's going to rob you, is going to rape you. These are very realistic facts of life. They do happen, but it's made us look at every unfamiliar face with a lot of negativity. So tomorrow when you see somebody in the train, you're not going to think, oh, let me go up to them and say hi, because what if they take me away from home? That's exactly the mentality that has grown into this unpeaceful environment that we believe is negative and not favorable to society as a whole. So this is an insight from the page, the Humans of Bombay page. And right in the beginning when I started off, I realized that there was a lot of negativity. So it doesn't matter what story I was portraying, it doesn't matter who it was, people were just negative. They were going all out, lashing out against the person in picture, lashing out against the page, saying that you've just copied Humans of New York, you're not original, you're doing something that's not something creative. And as I realized that I was posting post after post, Indians have a very different mentality from those people in New York. I started comparing the two pages, and I realized that people in New York were more open to feeling connected to people. Every post that was put up had a lot of positive feedback. People felt connected, people felt warm, they felt welcome. But in India and Bombay, it was just the complete opposite. People were lashing out. There was a lot of hate, to the extent that close to 15 portraits I've had to take down because the person in question was just feeling so offended. They actually messaged me on a personal level and said, take it down, it's offensive. As the page progressed, I did realize that there is some form of change because there were few people who were speaking out and saying, let's be more positive, let's get back some humanity. So as you can see, there are two posts that stood out predominantly over the rest. And I realized that they were very humanitarian posts. They were posts about love. The first story was about this child. He's around 21. And he came from Ahmedabad, he came to Bombay, and he had no friends. So he started hanging out with a bunch of street dogs in PDP, around PDP. And he just started taking care of them. Till date, he feeds 13 to 15 dogs, all of his own accord. And he's not in any form of news, no publication. He just does it because he said that they were my friends, that they were the first friends I made in Bombay. And that's a story that actually got the most hits. It got the most amount of positive feedback as opposed to what had been happening on the page earlier. And the second story was about this man I met in, the owner of Britannia & Co. He's this amazing Parsi man who actually lost his wife at a very young age, but she was a brilliant cook. So today his restaurant runs on the recipes that she created. And this post actually got shared around 4,000 times. And people were commenting saying, oh my God, what a love story, and this is human, this is humanity. So as we progressed, I realized that even though we have a lot of skepticism, we have a lot of negativity, there's actually something in us that's bursting to reach out, but we don't know how to channelize it because of the stigma that we've been brought up with. Don't talk to strangers. So essentially what Humans of Bombay is you see a stranger and you feel connected. So even though there was some sort of prejudice against it in the beginning, it kind of went and took a humanitarian turn towards the end. So I realized that there are a lot of projects happening worldwide that actually deal with things to do with strangers. So there was a flash mob that happened at CST. I'm pretty sure most of you all saw it. It was a great video. What I realized was this is exactly what Humans of Bombay does, but in a better way. So essentially, strangers come together, they perform for strangers live, and it's shared globally by strangers who don't know you, who don't know anything about you, but it's just creating harmony. It's different groups of people, different ages, different sexes coming together and creating something great. I realized that the more people share this content is because the more they're longing to feel connected, but they don't have the right channel to do so. There was a recent campaign by Coke, which was, if you put in a quarter in this special vending machine, you can see somebody in Pakistan. You can see a person in Pakistan, and you can actually dance to a certain song and coordinate your moves, and essentially what a flash mob is, but with just one person on the other side. It came back to how we've been brought up. We've had a stigma against our neighbor. Essentially, they're our neighbors, but we've been told from the beginning that there's a certain amount of skepticism towards the people in that nation, towards how we behave with them, how we behave towards them. But when this campaign came forward, it just boomed. People were sharing it, people were talking about it. It was because people wanted to feel connected. You don't want to feel hatred. It's a very negative feeling. It's something that nobody likes having. You want to feel positive. You want to feel like you're connected to somebody else. So I realized that the more projects you do, the more you can bring forward those kind of connections. So while these things are going viral on social media, on these digital platforms where you can share stories, where you can feel connected, I met this woman at Priyadarshini Park at 5:30 on a Sunday. And I spoke to her for close to 45 minutes when she told me her life story. She had been subject to domestic violence by her husband for around 20 years. And this one day when he was under the influence of alcohol, he just picked up some kerosene and set her on fire. And this recently happened. And she told me about how she went to the cops they didn't do anything. They didn't even arrest him. Nothing happened. Essentially, she was not heard. And then what she told me at the end of it was what actually surprised me the most. Her scars are actually really visible right from her neck till her stomach, but not one person who was passing her by approached her to ask her what happened. So while we're sharing these things online and showing support to actually eradicate domestic violence, when we see somebody who's in a lot of pain, we don't have it in us to approach them. We don't have it in us to make a sort of change. This post actually got shared like a couple of thousand times. People messaged us saying, what can we do to help her? What can we do to make a difference? Can we talk to this NGO? Can we talk to that NGO? But it struck me that thousands of people were passing her on the road, but not one person had it in them to go up to her and say, on the spot, do you need help? Let me take you there. And that's what's wrong with most of what's going on today, is that we see that there are things going wrong, but we don't want to rectify it. We'll see it online, we'll share it, we'll like it, we'll comment on it, and we'll move on. We basically, in this generation, lost a little bit of that humanity. Humans of Bombay recently also did a project in Kamatipura, which is actually in the center of Bombay, and it is the second largest sex slave area in all of Asia. And when I went to Kamatipura and I started speaking to these women, I started speaking to the children of these sex workers, it actually gave me a lot of insight into how we treat people. It's actually the hub of drugs, it's the hub of alcohol, it's the hub of sex trade, of course, it's the hub of illiteracy, of diseases. And so many people have attempted to go to this place to figure out why, but they can't, because it's a very complex human emotion. So when I got to speaking to these women and I started talking to them, I realized that most of us don't understand what they're going through, which is why we cannot come forward to help them. There was this girl who was 18 years old. She was like 3 or 4 years younger than me. And she started talking to me about her life and how she'd got into the sex trade, what she went through, and as an emotion, she started crying. So when you see somebody who's that emotional around you, your first instinct is to reach out by touch, so you can comfort them, you can give them a sort of, like hope. And she just recoiled and said, don't touch me, I have AIDS. And she said it herself. It didn't even cross my mind. It didn't even strike me to, check, because this is actually the hub of these kind of diseases. And I failed to explain to her that even though I tried my level best to explain to her that AIDS doesn't always necessarily spread by touch, she had victimized herself to such a big extent that she felt there was no hope. And she asked me repeatedly to not share her story because it would affect her income. It would affect the way her customers looked at her. She would basically face like complete humiliation in that society. So what I realized was that as I was talking to her, people have degraded her and downridden her to an extent where she doesn't know what's right, what's wrong. It's because nobody has helped her. It's because nobody has reached out to her. And that's when I spoke to Ms. Preeti Patkar. She's actually the owner of an NGO called Prerna, who works with sex workers. And she told me that a lot of college-going students, a lot of students from the IB, essentially your age, go into these NGOs to work, but as soon as they get that piece of recommendation, as soon as you get your validation that you've worked in this NGO from this month, they leave. It's happened 10 times around where people have gotten close to these children, the children of sex workers, and then as soon as they've gotten that validation, they've left. And that has a deep impact on these children because they get attached. And again, they're going through something like people leaving them. So what she told me was that it's not humanity. If you volunteer because you want a recommendation, you want a CV, and you want to get into a great university, it's not volunteering, it's not humanity, it's just a recommendation at the end of the day. She actually asked me to request young people to not volunteer. She only looks for volunteers above the age of 30, 35, who have a more sensitive and a more human approach to these children, to these people. And she just feels, and I agree, is that somewhere along the line, we've lost it. We've lost that kind of humanity. So I got to thinking after all this that I personally visited Kamatipura for the first time in 22 years that I've lived in Bombay because of Humans of Bombay. So I got to thinking that, you know, how many people do I talk to? How many people around me do I know? So I started mapping my friends across the world. We all have friends everywhere, we are family, and how many people you talk to in a day. And I realized that in one day, I speak to enough people globally to travel the world 3 times around. But sometimes I do not know the name of my neighbor. I don't know the name of the person who delivers milk to my house every day since the past 20 years. So it got me thinking that while we are global and while we're networking with people, while we're socializing with people, we're actually failing to go out there and experience things and experience the people around us that make our society. So what I want from this, essentially, I'm not asking anybody to go out there and just randomly start talking to strangers and like, you know, have like this comfort level. I mean, it's not something that's easily doable. But what I really want to bring across is that instead of just, I mean, if you like a Humans of Bombay post, I mean, it's great for me. But apart from just doing that, start getting to know people a little more. The next time this milkman is coming to your house and delivering milk, find out a little bit more about him, or your driver, or anybody who you see in your route but don't really stop and question. I actually thought of this Friends episode where Phoebe is talking to somebody on the phone. She's trying to sell a product, and she catches this man who's trying to commit suicide. So she drops everything that she's doing, goes up to him, and like tries to save his life. I mean, it's a really small example, and I know it's scripted, but it has a very deeper meaning into it. It's that when you start talking to people and when you start interacting with strangers, you never know who you're touching. So next time you see somebody who you kind of know and want to know better, go out there and do it, because you never know whose life you might be touching and whose life touches you. Thank you.